Every conflict needs a beginning. Sometimes it begins with an explosion, sometimes with a headline, and then sometimes with a story that is told so often and so confidently that questioning it starts to feel forbidden. In late April, South Asia was handed such a story. An attack in Pahalgam was immediately presented as settled truth, complete with an accused, a motive, and a ready-made conclusion. Responsibility was assigned before evidence was shared. Attribution came before investigation. Within hours, the narrative hardened. Within days, policy followed, borders closed, treaties were frozen, and by early May, missiles were airborne. But while television studios debated outrage, another process unfolded quietly, away from cameras and slogans. United Nations special rapporteurs began examining the events not as a political drama, but as a legal sequence. Their question was simple: what is proven and what is merely asserted? The answer, documented in their report, is uncomfortable. The experts condemned violence against civilians, but they also made something explicit. There was insufficient evidence to establish Pakistani state involvement in the Pahalgam incident. In other words, the foundational claim, the one used to justify escalation, remained unproven. Now, that little detail changes the entire story, because under international law, retaliation without attribution is not deterrence. It is unilateral force. On May 7th, Indian forces allegedly carried out strikes inside Pakistani territory. The justification relied on a narrative that had not yet passed legal scrutiny. The UN Charter does not allow force based on assumption. It requires necessity, proportionality, and transparency, including notification to the Security Council. According to the experts, that process was not clearly followed. The consequences were not abstract. The report documents civilian harm, populated areas affected, casualties, damage to religious sites, including mosques. These are not collateral footnotes in international law. They are violations. The experts were unequivocal. There is no separate recognized right to unilateral military force under the label of counterterrorism. Without proof, without process, without proportionality, force becomes something else entirely. To begin with, a breach of sovereignty, a threat to the right of life, and a trigger for reciprocal escalation. But the most revealing shift did not happen in the air. It happened in the rivers. Within days of the incident, India announced that the Indus Waters Treaty would be held in abeyance. To the untrained ear, this sounds administrative. To legal experts, however, it sounded alarming, because treaties, especially water treaties, do not pause on emotion. They cannot be suspended unilaterally. Procedures exist. Thresholds are strict, and mutual agreement is required. The experts called the phrasing legally ambiguous and the action unlawful. More importantly, they warned of its human cost. Interfering with river flows does not punish governments. It punishes populations. Millions of people whose access to water, food, health, and livelihoods depends on those very rivers. Water, they stressed, must never become political leverage. The report also revealed something quieter but deeply telling. Institutional dialogue had already been eroding. Indus Commission meetings had not been held for years. Data sharing had stalled. Dispute resolution mechanisms were bypassed. This was not a sudden breakdown. It was a gradual withdrawal from rules. Pakistan's leadership welcomed the report, not as a political win, but as confirmation of a principle that force cannot replace law and accusation cannot replace evidence. Because when a disputed incident is treated as established truth, when retaliation precedes investigation, and when treaties are suspended by declaration, the danger is not one conflict. The danger is precedent. A precedent where narrative becomes proof, where water becomes a weapon, and where legality becomes optional in moments of anger. History shows us this pattern clearly. False certainty escalates faster than facts, and once escalation begins, truth is usually the first casualty. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.